They laughed when I said I still knew how to handle money. A short, venomous laugh, the kind that pretends to be concerned. "Mom, you're old enough to rest," my son said, touching my shoulder like he was talking to a child. I smiled. I fell silent. But inside me, something awakened, not anger, not sadness. Just an old certainty. No one can take away from me what time has taught me. In that overly bright room, surrounded by young and impatient voices, I realized they had decided to bury me alive. Not in the cemetery, but in invisibility. They wanted my house, my savings, my silence. They said it was out of love, to protect me. As if a woman my age couldn't think. As if wisdom had an expiration date. I watched my daughter-in-law's calculated gaze as she spoke of family planning. Her long nails drumming on the table, her smile too sweet. The ticking of the clock marked the exact second I realized their plan was already underway. It was like watching a fire start inside the walls. No one could see it, but I could smell it. The cruelest part is that their betrayal didn't come from outside, but from within my own home. They said they didn't want to hurt me, just to manage things better. Pretty words to cover up what it really was, ambition. And it was in that moment, amidst paperwork and false promises, that I understood that their love had a price, and that I, ironically, was the one footing the bill. At night, the silence of the house seemed to mock me. The sound of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the wind hitting the window. Everything conspired to remind me that I was alone. But what they forgot is that silence, for those who have learned to survive in silence, is fertile ground. It was there, between one memory and another, that my mind began to work. I didn't yet know how, but I knew what. They would learn the difference between underestimating and destroying. People think that growing old means weakening. I've discovered it's the opposite. It's like the strong coffee left at the bottom of the pot. Darker, more bitter, more genuine. And perhaps that's why, when they decided to exclude me from decisions, they didn't realize they were giving me time. And time, for someone who has learned to wait their whole life, is a weapon. Their plan seemed perfect. The documents, the transfers, the fake smiles. Everything arranged to leave me with no choice. But there's something they never knew. I always keep copies. Copies of everything. And memories don't disappear like files. They stay there, waiting for the right moment to become evidence. They say money changes people. I say it only reveals them. And it was in this revelation that the old woman they thought was fragile began to disappear. In her place, someone they never truly knew was born. Because what was at stake wasn't just my money. It was my name, my history, my dignity. And if there's one thing time has taught me, it's that those who humiliate you because they think you're weak forget that weakness is just the interval between a fall and revenge. That day, while they surrounded me with sweet words and dirty intentions, I just smiled. And I thought, you'll still find out the true value of what you despised. And when you find out, you'll be the ones looking for me. You'll be the ones asking for what you said I didn't know how to use anymore. Tell me, what hurts more? Losing the money that was stolen, or having to beg to get it back? The next morning, I woke to the sound of the kettle and a strange calm. The kind of silence that precedes storms. The table still bore the marks of the previous night's dinner, half-empty glasses, crumpled napkins, and a forgotten piece of paper with my son's signature. An authorization document that I should have signed, handing him control of my savings. I hadn't signed it. They thought I would hesitate out of fear, out of weakness. But I was simply waiting for the right moment. And the right time is an art that only those who have lived long enough understand. As the sun streamed through the curtain, I saw my wrinkled hand on the wooden table and thought of all that those hands had done. Work, create, feed, help. There was strength there, a strength they no longer recognized. To them, I was just a tired woman who needed guidance. But what they called tiredness was, in fact, wisdom. The wisdom of someone who had seen many people fall because they thought they were in control. They came almost every day now, always with the same conversation disguised as concern. "Mom, could you rest, leave this to us?" I pretended to consider it. I asked innocent questions, let them talk more than they should. That's how I realized they had already started messing with my accounts. Small transfers, amounts that were missing, and no one could explain. And I, in my calm way, just watched. Trust is a curious currency. When you give too much of it, it loses value. And I realized that, at some point, my family started seeing me as a still-breathing safe. A repository of memories, stories, and money. But what they didn't know was that, before being a mother, I was a businesswoman. Before being a grandmother, I was a woman of numbers, spreadsheets, and contracts. And I never forgot anything. I spent the entire night reviewing documents, opening old files, cross-referencing information. I found a bank statement that didn't lie. My own son had used my name to take out a loan. A large sum, enough to ruin my stability if I hadn't noticed in time. My heart ached, of course. But not from surprise. It ached from the realization. Betrayal is always less shocking when you can already smell it before you see the face. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just got up, made coffee, and started writing. A plan. One that didn't involve the police or scandal. I didn't want soap opera revenge. I wanted motherly justice. The kind that teaches through pain, but without losing its elegance. As I wrote down each step, I realized that everything I'd been through had brought me to this point. Every no I swallowed, every time I was interrupted, every conversation where I was treated as if I didn't understand money itself. All of that was now fuel. They thought time had weakened me. But time has only made me more patient. The following weeks were a silent spectacle. I acted as if nothing had happened. I prepared lunch, smiled, listened to the same stories about investments, and kept everything in mind, the words, the glances, the slips. Whoever underestimates the silence of a mature woman has never learned to hear the sound of strategy. It was on one of those days, while pretending to listen to my daughter-in-law talking about how to modernize my bank account, that an idea came to me. I realized I could turn the tables without raising my voice. That I could transform humiliation into a lesson. And not just for them, but for myself too. Today I understand why so many people choose to stay here, following each revelation. Because there is something powerful in seeing someone recover what they tried to take from them. Dignity, respect, the power to decide. And that's exactly what I decided to do. Let them believe their own lie until the truth became impossible to deny. I didn't yet know how it would end, but I knew that when the time came, they wouldn't just ask for my forgiveness. They would ask for something even greater. Something that, ironically, I would have the power to grant or deny. And that morning, while having my coffee, I realized, patience is the most lethal weapon of an underestimated woman. Time passed, and the house began to fill with fake smiles. They came to visit me more often than usual, bringing cheap flowers and rehearsed phrases. "You look beautiful today," they would say, as if trying to distract a guard dog with a piece of bread. I observed everything in silence, every gesture, every exchange of glances between them. Hypocrisy has a smell, and I could feel it in the air, mixed with the sweet perfume of my daughter-in-law. One night, I heard muffled laughter coming from the living room. I stopped in the dark hallway and saw the two of them sitting on the sofa, examining my documents. My son, frowning, said it was to facilitate the succession, and she, in that soft tone, spoke of taking care of the family's future. I leaned against the wall, and for a second, the world seemed to spin. Those papers that represented a lifetime of work, sweat, and struggle were now toys in the hands of the one I loved most. When I realized my name was already being used to open accounts and close deals, I felt a chill run down my spine. But I didn't cry. Despair is a luxury a mature woman doesn't allow herself. We learn that when the ground shakes, what sustains us isn't a scream, it's the firmness of our steps. So, I started to act. I went to the bank discreetly, reset my passwords, and asked for old statements. The manager, a young and hurried man, looked at me condescendingly. "Are you sure you understand what you're asking for?" he asked, smiling. I simply returned the smile, cold and controlled. "My son, those who understand too much often lose track of what they owe." He blushed, and I left with a complete copy of everything I needed. That folder in my hands was more than just paper. It was proof that the story was still mine. That night, I opened the documents on the table and began to devise a counterattack. A simple but foolproof plan. Let them believe they had won. That I was blind, tired, docile. Every word, every gesture of mine would be calculated to feed the illusion they had created. In the following days, I began to act. I innocently asked about investments, pretended to forget numbers, let slip details so they would feel secure. And they did. Their confidence grew like a balloon about to burst. It was almost poetic to see them trapped in their own trap, two adults who confused age with weakness, experience with uselessness. But inside, there was something that weighed more heavily than anger. It was disappointment. The memory of when my little son used to run around the house with the coins I gave him to save for when he grew up. And now, there he was, a grown man, wanting to take from me what I once called my inheritance. Not the money, but the respect. The nights began to grow long. I would lie in bed and listen to the clock ticking away each second like a countdown. Sometimes I wondered if I was going too far, if it was worth it. But then I remembered the woman I saw reflected in the mirror, the one who had spent decades keeping quiet, swallowing insults, listening to advice that sounded like orders. That woman deserved, for the first time, to be heard. The contrast between the apparent calm and the storm brewing inside me was almost unbearable. I smiled during breakfast, but my hands trembled with anticipation when they touched the cup. I watched them laughing, making plans, and thought, they have no idea what's coming. It was on one of those mornings, when the sun streamed through the window and hit the wall clock, that the final idea came to me. An almost golden glow illuminated the hour hand, and for a moment, everything made sense. They had stolen my right to be respected. I was going to take it back, penny by penny, gesture by gesture. And in that golden light, which seemed to promise as much as it threatened, I realized my revenge would not be an explosion. It would be a slow, meticulous construction, as silent as the way they tried to erase me. And when it was over, they wouldn't just lose their money. They would lose the certainty that they knew who I was. That afternoon, it rained like it hadn't rained in a long time. The drops tapped against the window in a slow, almost measured rhythm, as if the sky were inviting me to think. I sat in the living room armchair with a cup of coffee and looked around. The house that once echoed with laughter was now a silent battlefield. Each object seemed to carry memories of another life, the towel embroidered by my own hands, the family portrait on the shelf, the distant smell of cornbread. It was all so familiar, and, at the same time, so foreign. It was there, watching the reflection of the rain on the glass, that I realized what hurt the most. It wasn't the robbery. It was the disrespect. It was the way they erased me, as if experience were something to be discarded. I thought of all the women my age that I know, friends, neighbors, church colleagues, and I saw the same tired look in them. The look of someone who has been left aside by people who claim to know what's best. And I realized, what happened to me wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. Deep down, I knew I couldn't change the past. But I could transform its meaning. I could use the pain as a tool. And that's how the plan stopped being just revenge. It became a lesson. Not only for them, but for me too. Because forgiveness may cleanse the heart, but justice, justice heals the soul. I started going to the bank more often, discreetly. I spoke with other managers, sought advice from old contacts, people who still respected me. Little by little, I rebuilt what they had tried to destroy. I transferred the money to accounts that only I knew about, invested part of it in something my son would never understand, myself. And the more I recovered what was mine, the more the anger transformed into serenity. On one of my trips to the bank, I saw a woman being treated the same way they had tried to treat me, with condescension. The employee spoke slowly, almost as if explaining a drawing to a child. I approached her, touched her arm, and said, "You know more than you think. They just haven't realized it yet." She smiled. And in that smile, I felt something rekindle inside me. It was an old memory, the pleasure of being listened to. I returned home feeling light, but determined. They thought the money was the prize, but they were wrong. The prize would be the moment they had to look at me again, not as a mother, nor as an elderly woman, but as an equal. The following week, my son showed up with a gift. A bouquet of flowers and a smile I knew well, the smile of someone in need. "Mom, the bank made things a little complicated, but it's temporary," he said, trying to sound calm. I listened in silence, each word falling like a stone to the ground. Inside, I already knew. Fate was beginning to give back everything that had been taken from me. As he spoke, I watched the rain outside. The drops no longer beat forcefully against the window. Now they slid slowly, as if the sky had also calmed. I thought of how many people at that very moment were sitting in their homes, feeling the same mixture of pain and strength. It is at this point that many feel the urge to support this journey, leaving a silent sign that the message touched them. Perhaps a gesture, a remembrance, a simple thought of empathy. I looked at my son and smiled. Not a smile of irony, but of peace. Because I knew that harvest time was approaching. And what they had planted was finally beginning to bloom, but not in the way they had expected. The phone rang in the kitchen. The sound was dry, insistent, cutting through the heavy air. And, without knowing why, I felt that something was about to change. Perhaps it was destiny announcing that the next page of the story was ready to be turned. I answered the phone, my hands still damp with coffee, and on the other end, I heard the manager's trembling voice. He called me ma'am, with a new, almost reverent formality. He said my son had tried to move money again from an account in my name, an account that no longer existed. For a second, I let the silence fill the space between us. Then, I simply thanked him, as if I already expected what was to come. When I hung up, I looked around. The house seemed to breathe with me. The clock on the wall showed exactly 9:30, the time when the truth began to unfold. Late in the afternoon, he arrived. He came with tense shoulders and a worn smile. His daughter-in-law was behind him, her purse clutched to her body, as if she needed to protect herself from something. I greeted them with the serenity of someone who already knows the script of the conversation. They spoke of unforeseen events, debts, a bank misunderstanding. I listened, and as they spoke, I noticed the irony of it all. They were the same voices that once taught me to be suspicious, now asking for understanding. The room was bathed in a warm light. The sun streamed through the curtains, drawing golden lines on the carpet. They seemed smaller in that light, like rag dolls that had lost their stuffing. I, on the other hand, felt strangely whole. Each of their words resonated and bounced back, finding no space to wound. The pain that once burned now transformed into observation, and I observed them with the distance that only mature disappointment allows. It was at that moment that I realized something profound. Revenge, when born of pride, destroys. But when born of dignity, it teaches. And what I wanted to teach them was simple. Respect is not demanded, it is earned. And when it is lost, it is not recovered with excuses, but with consequences. I made a point of offering coffee, as always. They accepted, somewhat uncomfortably. I served it with the same care as before, the same cinnamon scent he loved so much. The sweet, familiar taste seemed to ease the tension, until he asked, in an almost childlike tone, if everything would go back to normal. I put the cup down on the saucer and calmly replied, "It depends on what you call normal." The silence that followed was dense, almost physical. His daughter-in-law looked away, and he began drumming his fingers on the table, an old habit that betrayed his nervousness. There, in that small gesture, I saw the boy I raised and the man that power corrupted. And, for the first time, I didn't feel pity. I felt pity for myself, for having taken so long to see it. When they left, the sound of the door closing was liberating. I was alone in the room, staring at the empty cup. The smell of coffee still lingered in the air, mixed with the memory of the conversation. I stepped firmly, feeling the ground beneath my feet, and realized the fear that had paralyzed me had transformed into something much greater. In control. That night was long. The rain returned, fine and steady, as if washing away what remained of the past. I opened my laptop and, with a slight tremor in my hands, finalized the last stage of my plan, a strategic move that would ensure none of them could touch what was mine again. I did everything in silence, as I always did. And when I finished, I saved the file with a simple name, Inheritance. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. The streetlights reflected tiny stars in the puddle of water in the garden. I thought about how many times I had felt invisible, and now, ironically, it was in the invisible that I found power. The power to act without being noticed. The power to rebuild without needing to announce it. The phone rang again. I didn't answer. I preferred to listen to the sound of the rain. Because sometimes, silence is the most elegant answer someone can give. But something told me that story wasn't over yet. Fate has a curious way of giving back what is taken from us, and sometimes it gives it back with interest. The following days were strangely calm, almost rehearsed. The kind of peace that comes before change, when the world hasn't yet realized that something has already begun to transform. I would wake up early, make my coffee, sweep the yard, and observe the street activity, like someone watching the weather. Every detail of the routine seemed clearer, the smell of wet earth, the sound of falling leaves, even the hiss of the kettle. Everything seemed to say that a new phase was about to be born, silent but inevitable. My son never called again. Neither did my daughter-in-law. Their silence was an acknowledgement of my power, albeit unconscious. But along with that power came something I didn't expect, a different kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of absence, but the loneliness of understanding. When you start seeing too much, the world around you becomes small. I looked at the house, the same house that had held parties, laughter, and the smells of childhood, and saw an empty stage, where each memory was a character that had already said goodbye. It was on one of those mornings, while cleaning the bookshelf, that I found an old photo. I was younger, in a blue dress, and my son was still a boy, smiling with his eyes closed. For a moment, my heart ached. I thought about how many times I sacrificed so that he could have what I never had. How many yeses I said when I wanted to say no. How love, sometimes, blinds us in a sweet way, until the sweetness becomes poison. The image of that smile made me realize that there wasn't just revenge in my actions, but also a kind of mourning. I wasn't just punishing what they did to me. I was burying the woman who allowed herself to be erased. With each choice I made, I felt that woman disappear a little more. The one who swallowed her tears, the one who apologized for existing, the one who believed that growing old meant being left behind. The fear that had accompanied me in the first few days began to mingle with another feeling, difficult to describe. It was freedom, but a melancholic freedom made of losses. Because every liberation, deep down, is also a farewell. And I was saying goodbye to everything I had been, mother, wife, caregiver, to become simply myself. At night, the house darkened earlier. I would leave the lights off on purpose. I liked to see the outlines of things under the glare of the streetlights. The shadows danced on the walls like memories that refused to leave. Sometimes, I would talk to myself, repeating phrases I never said when I should have. No, I don't agree. No, that's not right. No, I'm not going to sign. It was as if, by saying them now, I was rewriting the past. And, in a way, I was. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the yard. My heart raced. I stood still for a few seconds, listening. The sound was rhythmic, cautious. I picked up my phone and walked slowly to the window. Outside, the gate swayed in the wind. No human movement. Only the high moon and the shadows of the trees trembling on the wall. I took a deep breath and smiled. The old fear was still trying to visit me, but now it was arriving too late. I closed the curtains and sat on the edge of the bed. I looked at my hands, aged but firm, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. Pride in having resisted. Pride in having rebuilt myself. The world had always taught me to be strong for others, but never for myself. And now, for the first time, my strength wasn't for protecting anyone. It was only mine, and that was enough. Outside, the wind picked up, making the windows bang. The sound was almost like a drumbeat, announcing something. Perhaps it was just nature, perhaps the universe warning that the story is not yet over. The rain began to fall slowly, and the air filled with the smell of wet earth. I stood there, watching the drops trickle down the glass, remembering everything I had lived through. There was something beautiful about it. A kind of new beginning that didn't yet have a name, but already had a form. And as the sound of the storm grew louder, I felt a chill down the back of my neck. It wasn't fear. It was a premonition. Something, or someone, was about to return. The next morning, the phone rang again. The same number from the bank. But this time, it wasn't about me. It was about them. The manager, his voice tense, explained that an irregular transfer had been blocked, an attempt to move funds that, ironically, were still in my name. For a few seconds, I let the silence speak for me. It was proof that fate has a sense of humor. I simply thanked them and hung up. And, in doing so, I realized the tables had completely turned. The news spread quickly. Small conversations began to circulate, first among neighbors, then among acquaintances. My family, who had previously treated me like a burden, were now trying to understand how I had recovered everything. I watched from a distance, without needing to say anything. Because there are victories that aren't announced, they are felt in the eyes of those who underestimated them. I began to realize something curious: the power of calm. When we don't react, the world becomes destabilized. They expected me to scream, cry, beg. But silence, that same silence that has so often been interpreted as weakness, was now my sharpest shield. It was in silence that I learned to move the right pieces at the right time. And the more I remained quiet, the louder the sound of the consequences echoed. At the market, a neighbor stopped me and said, "I heard what happened, and I need to say, I would do the same." Her gaze held something between admiration and relief. And I understood, in that instant, that my story wasn't just mine. It was a mirror, a reflection of so many other women who were discredited, underestimated, erased. Perhaps, in some way, I was speaking for all of them. Weeks passed, and my son's behavior began to change. First came the short, formal messages. Then, the phone calls. A different voice, lower, more restrained. The arrogance had dissolved. In its place, an almost childlike tone, asking for help without saying the words. And I, even knowing what he deserved, felt a lump in my throat. A mother's love is a silent war between the heart and judgment. I watched from a distance. Each of his steps was a consequence of his own choice. And yet, inside me, something wavered, between satisfaction and sadness. Because winning isn't always synonymous with joy. Sometimes, it's just the certainty that there's nothing left to prove. One night, I sat on the porch and gazed at the sky. The clouds moved slowly, as if time were breathing along with me. I thought about everything I had lost to get there, and what I had gained without anyone noticing. It wasn't the money. It was control over my own story. The feeling of finally being in command of the narrative of my life. The memory of that day at the bank came flooding back. The humiliation, the employee's look, the tone of my own son's voice saying that I wasn't cut out for this. And now there, in the darkness of the night, I realized how symbolic it had all been. The same system that once disregarded me now recognized me as a role model. The same son who doubted me now depended on my signature to survive. And yet, there was no resentment. There was a serenity that only comes when one understands the value of time. Because time is the true judge. It reveals who was right, who wasted love, who learned, and who still repeats the same mistakes. As I was thinking about this, I heard footsteps at the gate. I looked through the gap in the curtain. It was him, standing there, under the yellow light of the lamppost, hesitant, with an envelope in his hands. The same gesture as someone who, one day, brought flowers to deceive me. But now, there was no disguise. There was weight, shame, and perhaps regret. For a moment, I thought about not opening it, about leaving it there, facing its own silence. But something inside me told me that certain encounters need to happen, not for us, but for the lessons they leave behind. Perhaps you understand this kind of dilemma, when the heart wants to close the door, but the soul begs to listen. Tell me, what would you do? Because it was precisely in this impasse that fate placed me, and the decision I would make next would change everything. He stood outside for long minutes, as if waiting for the wind to decide for me. The envelope in his hands trembled slightly, betraying his discomfort. I opened the door slowly, letting the silence speak first. Time seemed suspended. Not even the rustling of the trees dared to break that moment. When our eyes met, I realized how much he had aged. It wasn't just his face. There was a profound exhaustion, the invisible weight of wrong choices. He held out the envelope without saying a word. For a moment, I thought I wouldn't have the courage to take it. But I did. The paper was warm, as if it carried something alive. Or perhaps it was the warmth of his hands, heavy with regret. I opened it slowly. Inside, a handwritten letter, the handwriting trembling. The first lines were a confession, the following ones, a plea. And between one apology and another, a phrase that struck me, "I only realized your worth when I needed what you built." It was ironic. The same mouth that once told me I was too old to understand money was now asking for help so I wouldn't lose everything. I closed the letter and placed it on the table. He watched me, waiting for some reaction, a gesture, an opening. But I didn't give him one. I learned that silence, when used wisely, is stronger than any speech. I sat down before him, and for a moment, time turned back. I saw the boy who once asked me for comfort, the teenager who promised to take care of me when I grew old, the same one who later abandoned me, trading love for convenience. Life has a cruel and fair way of balancing the accounts. Now it was he who sought shelter, and I who held the key. Outside, the sky was beginning to darken. The first raindrops hit the roof, slow, measured, as if marking the rhythm of the conversation that wasn't happening. With each distant thunderclap, his words seemed to wither. He tried to explain himself, stumbling between justifications and restrained tears. I listened, without interrupting, not out of empathy, but out of respect for the truth that, at last, was coming to light. He spoke of regret, of mistakes, of illusions. But what struck me wasn't the request, it was the look in his eyes, that look of someone who, for the first time, saw the person behind his mother. And suddenly, I realized that moment wasn't about revenge, nor about forgiveness. It was about understanding. About what time does when life forces us to look into the eyes of those we've hurt. As he spoke, my memories paraded before me like an old film. The arguments, the silences, the times I swallowed my pride to keep the peace. It all came back, but without pain. Only with a cold, almost scientific clarity. The pain had already served its purpose. Now it was just material for analysis. When the clock struck 9, the rain intensified. He fell silent. We stood there, face to face, two survivors of a war neither of us wanted to win. And it was in that instant that I understood something essential. There is no victory when loss is what unites us. I got up and went to the window. The streetlights reflected on the glass, distorted by the raindrops. I simply said, "Life takes turns, my son. But it doesn't always return to the same place." He looked at me, confused, and before he could ask, I added, "Sometimes we reach a point of no return. Only learning." I took the envelope and returned it. I said I would read it carefully, that I needed to think. He nodded, as if understanding that he no longer has control over anything. And then, before leaving, he murmured something almost inaudible, "Forgive me," that the wind carried away before I could respond. I closed the door carefully. The sound of the latch echoed through the house, like a period. I sat down again, my heart calm, but awake. Outside, the storm intensified, and for a moment, I swore I heard the distant sound of thunder answering for me. But the truth is, the letter was still there, on the table, untouched. And there was something in it that seemed to pulsate. I knew that within that paper lay a greater revelation. Something he didn't have the courage to say aloud. Something that could change everything, again. I stared at the envelope for long minutes after he left. The whole house seemed to hear my breathing. The sound of the rain, which had been distant before, now tapped against the windows like impatient fingers begging to come in. That letter seemed to have a weight disproportionate to its size. As if inside it there was something alive, pulsating, ready to change the course of everything once again. I picked it up carefully, like someone holding a truth about to bite. I sat at the table and stared at the trembling handwriting. The irregular letters spoke volumes more than the words themselves. They revealed weariness, regret, and perhaps fear. I slowly opened the envelope, listening to the tearing of the paper as if it were a forbidden sound. The first lines were what I expected. Apologies, justifications, distorted memories. But then, something changed in the tone. The words began to become denser, more personal, almost desperate. He confessed that some of the money he claimed to have invested had been embezzled, not just by mistake, but through blind trust in someone close to him. A woman. Someone who deceived him, who convinced him that she could multiply the family's wealth. And, in the end, took everything. Every penny. I read that and felt a mixture of indignation and irony. The same son who called me naive had been deceived by an even bigger swindle. But what really struck me wasn't the scam itself. It was the name. A name I knew very well. The woman who had deceived him was someone I myself had taken in years ago, when he was still a teenager. A young woman with a sweet voice, a quick glance, and an easy smile. I helped her get her first job, gave her shelter when she had nowhere to stay. And now, Fate was revealing to me that she had become the perfect mirror of the ingratitude I myself had created. The room seemed to shrink. The air grew heavy, dense, as if the past had returned to confront me. The rain outside intensified, and the sound of the drops against the glass marked the rhythm of my breathing. I stood up slowly and went to the mirror. The reflection showed me a woman who was no longer the same. Firm features, eyes full of stories, a silence as sharp as a blade. There was something new there. A dangerous calm, the calm of someone who understands their own power. The strangest thing is that, instead of anger, I felt a kind of clarity. Everything suddenly made sense, every gesture, every word, every betrayal. The world owed me nothing, and I owed nothing to anyone anymore. Life, deep down, had always prepared me for that moment. I learned to lose in order to learn to choose. And choosing, now, was my greatest privilege. I picked up the letter again. I read the last lines. He said he needed me, not just for the money, but for the strength he saw in me. The woman I humiliated is the only one who can still save me. That struck me in a strange way, not as a compliment, but as a belated realization. He finally saw what I had always been, even when no one else did. I went back to the window. The street was deserted, covered in reflections. The light from the streetlights mingled with the fog, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere. I thought about going out, wandering aimlessly, letting the rain wash away the rest of what still bound me to the past. But something made me stay. It was as if the house, a silent witness to everything, was asking me to wait. And that's when I heard the sound, an engine parking out front. The headlights of a car cut through the curtain of rain. The headlights illuminated my room for a moment, revealing the glint of the still open envelope on the table. My heart raced. The clock was almost midnight. The door slammed shut, as if someone had touched it. The wind, perhaps. Or not. I stood motionless, trying to distinguish the sound between the noise of the rain and the rustling of the leaves in the yard. The feeling was the same as before, the premonition that something was approaching. The difference was that, this time, I felt no fear. Only one certainty: the past was not over. It had returned to settle its last accounts. And, for the first time, I was ready to face it, not as a victim, but as the author of my own story. The door opened slowly, creaking as if the sound betrayed the presence of a ghost. But it wasn't the past that entered, it was its consequence. The woman from the letter was there, soaked by the rain, with the same look that had once feigned gratitude. Time hadn't changed her as much as guilt had. She hesitated for a moment, clutching a bag to her chest, as if trying to protect what little dignity remained. I said nothing. I simply watched her, like someone watching a final episode whose ending they already knew. She took a deep breath, gathering courage to speak. And then, with a trembling voice, she confessed what I already knew, that she had deceived my son, that she had used him, and that now, indebted and alone, she needed my help. The irony was almost poetic. Fate, which is rarely fair, this time seemed to have a refined sense of symmetry. I sat before her, with the same control I had learned to master with such difficulty. Each of her words pierced me, but not like an arrow, like a distant echo, incapable of wounding. The pain that once silenced me was now my armor. And the more she spoke, the clearer it became that the power had shifted. She, who once looked down on me, now spoke from below, with teary eyes and restless hands. I could have said anything. I could have shouted, brought up memories, insulted her. But I only said, "Sit down." She obeyed. And there, between us, the silence weighed more than all the words in the world. I picked up my son's letter and placed it on the table. "Do you know what this is?" I asked. She nodded, her voice a whisper. "I know." That's when something inside me finally calmed down. I understood that justice doesn't need an audience, nor applause. Sometimes, it's enough to be present when balance is restored. And, at that moment, everything was balanced. She asked for forgiveness. I just looked. I didn't accept, I didn't deny. Because forgiveness, when it's true, doesn't need to be spoken, only understood. After she left, the rain stopped. The street seemed clean, washed. I opened the windows and let the fresh air in. The smell of wet earth mingled with that of the old wood of the house, and, for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. Not a passive peace, but the kind that comes from regained control. From the silent power of someone who survived distrust, abandonment, and injustice, and transformed it all into wisdom. I went to the mirror once more. The woman who looked back at me was different. The same face, but a completely new look. There was light where there had once been pain. And for the first time, I understood what it means to age with purpose. Not to lose your youth, but to gain clarity. To know who you are, even when the world tries to convince you otherwise. Later, my son called. His voice was different, tired, but sincere. He said he had read his own letter aloud, and that now he understood what I had always tried to teach him. I didn't answer immediately. I just listened. And when he finished, he said a single sentence, "Now you know what it really means to begin." And I hung up. While the phone was still vibrating in my hand, I looked out the window and saw the sun breaking through the clouds. It was one of those simple moments that seemed to carry a hidden message. The golden light spread slowly, warming the still damp ground, and I realized that everything I had lost had brought me exactly to this point, the place where pain transforms into power. Perhaps this is what they call rebirth, when what they tried to erase within you returns stronger, calmer, clearer. Not as revenge, but as truth. Today, I look back and I don't feel anger. I feel pride. Because time has taught me that being underestimated is the best way to prepare for a silent victory. And that's why I keep telling this story, so that those who listen know that there's always a way to rewrite their own destiny. If this journey touched you in any way, leave a mark. Not for me, but for yourself. To remember that dignity is the rarest and most powerful form of wealth. And that, in the end, it is dignity, and only dignity, that makes the world bow before those who never gave up on themselves.